The second half of our third class on karma as yoga is now underway as we complete this series with its 8 or 10 charts that we've been looking at. And I said before the break that the koa ula bird, our Hawaiian bird here with the red tail, is sort of the centerpiece for these charts. And the backdrop being a beautiful painting done back in the 70s, I think, by Andrew Annenberg, one of our Hawaii artists who gave us this beautiful oil painting for my very first album called Wingspan. So this bird has been with us forever, and it's a bird that we've noticed very high up in the cliffs, and it soars very high, and it never comes to the ground. Nobody ever sees it come to ground. Even when it nests and has its eggs, it does so in the caves of cliffs. So it's a very nice metaphor for the soul that stays very, very high in its own awareness and barely sets foot on earth, can just see it at a distance. It kind of follows some of these ways of transcendent action and inaction, because you could say, even if you looked at the 8 limbs, affectionately called of karma yoga there that we noted, that those also are kind of transcendent. It is really a kind of inaction that you're engaged in. So action is an assumption by the soul. It's not the end-all and be-all of life, as we were mentioning at the break. That's all they can really do is act and suffer the results. But there is a way of, of course some people go towards good action, and that's fine. That's white instead of black. But white quite often has too much of a connection with mixed, with gray. And so good actions can turn out negative. We know that individually, we know that collectively, we know that as a nation, and working with the collective mind and the peoples of the world, that the best of intentions can even become skewed, even against your better will, and therefore then white karma becomes something that's inferior to colorless karma. And colorless becomes something that's very intriguing to the spiritual aspirant. They want to know more about that, especially when they see it as we saw it in Swami Vivekananda Maharaj, when we took the Vedanta teachings from him throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s, when he was here in the body. So, and he'd often say, as this chart will show us, the 2 wings of the bird. A bird needs 2 wings to get off the ground, and so he meant Jnana and Bhakti. So when he was speaking like that, the reference was pretty much to wisdom and devotion. Whereas when we're talking about the chart we're on right now, with the koa ula bird bearing the 4 yogas on its body, which is very nice, we're talking about the tail feathers and the body. So the 2 wings, one would be, if you can see there, devotion. That will get you half off the ground. But if you put it with knowledge, you can actually get off the ground. And the bird's body then, and that is the action, the karma yoga that you do in the body. And then the tail feathers is meditation, because Holy Mother used to say that's like the rudder of a boat. You want to use meditation daily to guide the body of the boat. There's a song of Kabir uses that in his songs, and other teachers of Indian darshanas and dharma use that as an apt analogy. So you can see how all of this verily intrigued the mind of Vivekananda when he came here to the West from India. India itself, which had fallen a long ways from understanding its own dharma when he was there, he used to weep in compassion for the poor state of the people of India when they were the authors of this Sanatana Dharma, this wide open and deep and far-reaching truth of religion with a capital R. And wanted to bring that back in no uncertain terms, but also wanted to take it in its rather rare but true form to the Western peoples, which he managed to do, England and America and parts of Europe and other parts of the country he visited in his short, brief 38 or 39 years life here in the body. sort of like Shankara, only living here 32 years back in 700 AD. So the connections between Buddha, Shankara, and Vivekananda are so prevalent as to almost be obvious that this was the same soul. Basically, we're all the same soul, so advaitically we can say, if we're talking from the standpoint of Atman, we all share the same consciousness, which is unbroken and boundless. But again, when the ego gets in charge, or even when the ripe ego is more prominent still, that is, when you're working your way to the higher limbs of yoga, or practicing karma yoga, that your ripe ego has a much better chance of succeeding than your unripe ego. Pakvahamkara, apakvahamkara is how Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa Dev used to say that. So let's pick up this chart quickly as we're using these two charts as today's class to put a capper on this title, Karma as Yoga. Because if we put Karma Yoga on this side of the chart this time, across the way from from Raja Yoga, action and inaction, we can see side by side some of the connections there. Study and practice of the lower four limbs of yoga would be what you want to do in Karma Yoga. So that would be Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama. You are working on Karma Yoga. More specifically, as I started to say when you were practicing ahimsa, when I took that example, when you're doing the four limbs of Raja Yoga, which is why people are writing me today, several dozens at least now we have working on the Raja Yoga email class that we have carried off in after the new millennia dawned. We had some 110 classes or so forth that people are taking through the email. And prison inmates are taking it through the snail mail still even, and writing in questions. And that will be a book that will come out, hopefully both an e-book and a printed book, of some many pages of a cross-section of some 100 or more people that took this course over the period of the years it was offered. It's now completed as far as its the composition of its monthly class that was sent out, and now people are writing in to get those lessons still. And so when they write in, they're doing a study of Patanjali's sutras. It's called Raja Yoga. It's also called Patanjala because it was named after the father of yoga, Lord Patanjali. They call it Dhyan Yoga sometimes. They call it Ashtanga Yoga. By the way, out there, if you see anybody offering Ashtanga Yoga classes, make sure you ask them, what are you doing? Are you doing 8 or are you just doing one yoga? Because they'll probably just be taking you through maybe asana, that's one limb, and maybe a little breathing exercise, that's maybe 1.5 limbs. But if you're calling it Ashtanga, it should be 8-limbed. Otherwise, you should just call it Hatha or Hatha and Prana Yoga, but Pranayam. But basically, to be clear about it, those are 4 very noble names you're given to the real, authentic 8-limbed yoga of India by this great, great soul that everyone reveres. Affectionately called the father of yoga, although I've heard some objections to calling him that from some Western scholars and so forth, because yoga has been there for so long, all the way back to Ram's time and before. Nevertheless, it's an affectionate title given because he did systematize it in such a way that it's never been done before, and this was about 140 AD. So he had the advantage of living, some 700 years, 600-700 years after Lord Buddha, and some 500 or 600 years before Shankara and Gaudapada. Philosophically some history there, but nevertheless this point about the study and practice of the lower 4 limbs of yoga is very important, and would take you up to correct breathing, which is a kind of action. See, across the board then, if you were to look at it from the standpoint of Raja Yoga, study and practice of the upper four limbs of yoga are there. So you can see how karma and yoga could give you a full course. They could be two wings of the bird, or at least the body and that which is the rudder that guides you through across the solid earth, as Kabir says in his song. So if you want to compare, pretty much you've covered all 8 limbs there when you're looking at a side-by-side comparison of the yogas of action and inaction. The next point is striving towards achieving mental oneness in action. So you have an idea about Raja Yoga when you're practicing Karma Yoga, and this could occur about at the level of pratyahara, because the senses are connected to your mind now, not just to the objects. Pranayama should probably convince you of that my energy is actually coming from within me. That's one of the titles for next year's classes, is a full study on prana, and how that connects, a missing link, I'm calling it. Prana, the missing link. And so we need to know about our subtle energy inside of us. Just beautiful article in the New Nectar called Qi, about the Chinese principle of Qi. Nice, beautiful, scholarly, long, full article by a wonderful Chinese practitioner of Taoism and Chinese Buddhism, and how that's very much misunderstood, the word Qi nowadays, probably even in China, by a lot of contemporary people. And the same with prana then, in India and in the West, how that's a missing link, and Vivekananda pronounced it so when he came here in 1893, and for his first visit of 2. So if you're striving towards achieving mental oneness in action, then thought must be father to the deed. If I quote one of their Western scholars, thought is father to the deed. It's a beautiful saying. I would take it closer in connection, because one just comes right out of the other. One's the gross form of a subtle cause. Your thought is the subtle cause for your gross action. And that should be obvious and evident, but quite often it isn't, because people aren't, their deeds are running counter to their thoughts. Even when they try otherwise sometimes. I'm going to do this to the best of my ability. Oops, it went south. It went wrong, or I didn't intend it to do that. Courts are probably filled with people who are getting sued or sent to jail because their actions went other than their deeds, than their thoughts. So this is something that yoga will help correct, and nothing else will, I think. It's got to be a practice that's connected with spirituality and philosophy and cosmology and sadhana. Those 4 things, if you have them, you're a very happy camper here. You're a very fortunate seeker, practitioner, if you have those. If you even have the desire to sit down and meditate, pick up one of the books on our shelves, or come to a class and listen to a teacher, then you're a very fortunate person in this day and age, and you're beginning to remember the import of the spiritual path and the teacher and how it connects. I got a beautiful letter, long letter from a Indian Hindu man yesterday, devotee, who went to college back east, right across the street from the Rhode Island Vedanta Center, and he used to see it, the center, in the shadows of this big library he studied, and he sat in a window in the library and looked out on the roof of that Vedanta Center, and he never knew anything about Vedanta at that time. Mm-hmm. And so now he went back there the other day for a reunion of some kind. He walked around, there's the Rhode Island Center, and he's a full Vedantist now. And he looked up, and there's the building with the window he used to choose for study to look out of, where he looked down on the ceiling or the roof of the Vedanta Center. He's telling me this long story about how Vedanta was always in his life, even when he didn't know it. So this is just knowing after, as we say. It's remembering after the fact that you chose this path, and you chose it so you could uncover it again. So it's sort of like a game of hide and seek in a way that the soul plays with itself. And of course, this must be a more conscious soul that does this. Otherwise, it's a game of hide and seek where there's no end to it. There's no granny, or what is it? You don't get home free. You see, or find base, home base. You see, you're just always running around, not finding home base, and never winning the game, never becoming successful. So anyway, that reminds me of that, and you can see across the board from this kind of achieving of mental oneness, Raja Yoga points to striving towards dissolving the mind's vibrations. It's an amazing thing how these four, remember Brahmapada, waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and Turiya, can be put side by side with the four stations of the word, Para, Pashanti, Madhyama, and Vaikari, and those could be put straight across from the dissolving of the mind stream, and you can see that it's just really all affecting the same thing. And one of it's more on the cosmological level, and one's on a more philosophical level, and one's more on the level of transcendence. So these are the kind of connections that you will come upon. Like I said, like karmas are buried in objects, and so you have to meditate on the object to get the karma for that object out of the past. Why am I attached there? You meditate on the object. Oh, I see. I coveted it, or I was averse to it, or I owned a lot of it, or I gained a fortune on it, or I lost a fortune on it. Whatever it is from your past lifetime is buried in that object. So when you connect the senses to the objects, it's not just to detach, or because I'm too attached. It's that your karmas are actually connected to those objects. And it's the same with your work, action. Your karmas are connected to the actions you did with objects. This also should be very obvious to people, but they don't think this deeply from the yogic standpoint about it. There's a lot of taking for granted that goes on, and a lot of wool over the eyes problem that goes on with this. But yogi wants to strip these coverings off and see things as they really are, and experience the truth of objects on whatever level that they exist, as far as they'll go, you see. And so that's very important to the process. So striving towards dissolving the mind's vibrations, that's part of what comes up for me when I think about that. It's very connected to the four stages of the word, and I'm saying this because it's one of the subjects for next year's classes in our live streaming, but you'll all be there for, I hope, as we look into it. The next point here under Karma Yoga is performing action as duty and worship free of all motivations and expectations. Across the board for that, in Raja Yoga, is performing all actions in a meditative state so as to avoid karmic accrual. And you see, we're kind of fleshing out these 8 things, but we're putting it more in terms of statements that correlate across the board so we can see action next to inaction, and possibly maybe make a decision for ourselves, or that conclusion that we were talking about in the first half, that I need to practice the yoga of inaction consciously. It's not just I have to do my actions consciously or mindfully. I'm going to have to put this together with its opposite so that I'll know there's a goal for it. Otherwise, I could just fall back into the idea that work is the only thing. And I'm getting to an altruist, and I'm doing good works. I'm still getting some bad results from that, but I can forbear it, so now I'm a warrior, but now I'm no seer, you see. They talk about that, and so you really want to get to an ultimate goal with this. And all the seers have said there's no meaning and no use for work whatsoever except that it leads to knowledge. Money, family, progeny, occupations, jobs, a million acts will not get you enlightenment. All the great seers say that in their scriptures and in their testaments. So it has to lead to knowledge. And Vivekananda was the latest among them who came to bring this point out when he brought out the 4 yogas, that it has to lead to knowledge, and that duty is the midday sun that's burning the very vitals of humanity, as he said. So it's good, it's okay for a time, but then it turns into a morbid dream. I'm quoting him verbatim out of his letters to Western Ashtamits. So we then ought to have some idea, maybe preconceived, if possible, that we should hands off of work eventually. And I would say this cautiously to the Western people, because it's not about retirement, so that I can enjoy more objects and more, I can enjoy the work of pleasure, or the work of leisure. You see, there's a lot of work in leisure. To make a good meal, or to have a good vacation. And nowadays, that's almost as much work as just forget it. I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm just going to sit in one place like the yogis do. And so does work ever cease? So you might want to, make a point for including the yoga of inaction into your spiritual menu or diet. See, something I need to work on, and it's all done up here and beyond. So you're not going to need a lot of money to do it. You're not going to need a lot of objects. Probably the only thing you're going to need is some time nowadays. Time, karma, sadhana. The 3 elements Holy Mother told us in the attainment of enlightenment. Kala, karma, sadhana, if you want it in Sanskrit. Across the board then is performing all action in a meditative state to avoid karmic accrual. Now let's look at the penultimate under karma yoga, recitation of the mantra to calm and master the restless mind. That's where karma yoga has its affection or its connection, or both, with bhakti. Mantra is a kind of action you take, and it's a cause and effect thing still. It will actually destroy the effects and get you back to the cause of something. Om Hari Om Hari Om Hari Om Tat Sat. I'm changing that. Om Hari Om Japa Harini Om Tat Sat. See, because we want japa, we want the mother of perfection in japa to come forward and clear all our karmas with this ingredient called the mantra. Because in this day and age, and in this country particularly, or these Western countries, we're too busy. We have a habit of work. So even if you hear the words that are coming out of my mouth, and you go and try and find, meditate upon them and practice them, it's going to be very hard for you to leave off the habit of work. So why you want to look at these very closely, if you want to call them that, the 8 limbs of karma yoga. Look at that idea of even-mindedness and non-attachment to fruits, and it's almost, if you read that right, it almost looks like the higher limbs of Raja Yoga. It's all in action. Hard to call that karma yoga anymore when you look at the laws. Across the board from this mantra is in Raja Yoga, you are reciting the mantra to merge the mind into a non-dual state. So you can see how mantra will purify the mind, like scrubbing bubbles, getting down into the subconscious, we used to say, bringing the impurities to the surface so they can see the light of Guru, Dharma, and Sangha. And you can then get at them, because otherwise they stay hidden, like in the objects, and my attachment to the objects. I never once might have suspected that the chair or couch I'm sitting on, has my karmas in it, and until I took it apart and looked at it. See, then I got off the couch and sat on the floor like this. So basically, I had to inspect the object for its emptiness. emptiness of the ability to fulfill me and emptiness of substance. Basically, you've got it right there. That's Buddhist for you. It's empty of the ability to fulfill me, and I thought it could. And it's empty of substance because it's just swirling particles changing at a billionth of a second. So, oh, gee, I have a different idea now about objects. See? And with a change of mind comes a change of nature. And your base human nature can all of a sudden transform now back to your divine nature. You have the route wide open for you there. And all you did was change your way of seeing around senses, objects, and their connection. Turn in next year when I give that class. How to deify objects and senses. The final thing here is devotion to the path of action for the purpose of serving God and mankind is karma yoga. I'll go to it quickly. In Raja Yoga, it's devotion to the path of meditation to bring enlightenment to all beings. So, different directives for each of these yogas, but you can see how closely connected they are and how well they will work together. Dovetail, or kula e ula tail if you want, together with one another, and help you reach the highest goal. Now, so that we can go on in the time remaining to look at one other chart, let's read this final quote of Swami Vivekananda. If you have known the Atman as the one existence, and that nothing else really exists, for what desire do you trouble yourself? Through Maya, all this doing, good, etc. came into my brain. Now they are leaving me. I got more and more convinced that there's no other object to work except for purification of the soul. Soul there means mind, by the way. To make it fit for knowledge. This world, with its good and evil, will go on in various forms. Only the evil and good will take new names and new seats. But my soul is hankering after peace and rest eternal, undisturbed. That's actually a very good segue into Jnana and Bhakti, which would give you that stairway, or those two rungs of the ladder, of a four-limbed ladder that the four yogas are. So if we wanted to sing that in a way, that the epitome of that quote, we would sing some of Swamiji's great pieces here that were written about him. Harindra's chestitai galagyo gayanai parigyanar budo maharshi darshanai Yatindro Shakti Bir Vavanyam Nastikim Vivekananda Te Prabhate Pranjali Narendra Shashave Narendra Yovane Narendra Kridane Narendra Shikshane Narendra Palane, Narendra Yarpane, Vivekananda Te Prabhate Pranjali, Vivekananda Te Prabhate Pranjali. So, if we were to look at a person who had mastered in sight of that kind of conclusion that he so nicely expressed for us there, these two yogas, karma and akarma, who was very fully aware of them, who was, according to Sri Ramakrishna, a nitya siddha, nitya, eternal, siddha, perfect. Then we might look at his actions like this verse states, Hail Vivekananda, all excellences abide in thee, Your heroic actions remind us of Hanuman. Can we think of anyone who was more successful in his actions and more dedicated than Lord Hanuman? And we had that chart that had him 2 weeks ago, Sunday, and all the teachings on agency, with him as the frontispiece. It goes on to say, your unrivaled detachment marks you as a supreme renunciate. Hanuman, next to renunciate, you get where I'm going with this. You see, karma yoga done perfectly, renunciation of all action realized perfectly. It goes on further. Your music and poetry blend artistry with heartfelt devotion. So there you have the arts and devotion, bhakti. All the arts all dedicated to God. Every one of his poems and his songs he sung and so forth. To Sri Ramakrishna, when he was a young man, were all filled with devotion, and he had this voice that was thrilling to listen to. Sri Ramakrishna would go into samadhi when he heard Naren sing, on most occasions. It goes even further. Your infinite wisdom reflects the state of a vijnani. A vijnani is someone who's had spiritual realization and then come back from it and can then teach others. So that samadhi, got it, and then can come back to the lower limbs and teach it, or come back to the world of works and be effective in it. It goes further. Profound inner visions mark you as a great rishi. In this auspicious dawn of illumination, O Vivekananda, we offer you our reverent salutations. So all of those things, all excellences are in him, heroic actions are in him, unrivaled detachment, supreme renunciation, heartfelt devotion as an artist and poet, a vijnani of the highest realization, and a great rishi. Because we just sang in the first half, Ramakrishna Ekadin. And one of those verses was Sapta Rishi Mandalike. The mandala of 7 rishis, he was the highest of them. And that was a pronouncement of Sri Ramakrishna. He's from the highest realm. He's the rishi of the Brahmaloka. Such. He comes to earth, takes on a body, but he keeps his causal body in a very high state for hundreds of years at a time. So when Sri Sharda Devi had to say something about Naren that would help us understand him, she'd say, oh, he's a being that keeps his body, keeps his subtle body in a state of meditation for 700 years at a time. That's how she said it. So you can see that's not very long. It's probably like an hour, 7 hours meditation for us one day. See, time shrinking as it does in samadhi or in deep sleep. But you might see him on earth in a body, every 1,000 years or so. And so these kinds of things are also connections we want to make back to a soul who, according to a verse like that, written by Swami of the Ramakrishna order, who I think is still living, helps us to see thousands and thousands of people meditating on Swami Vivekananda, many of them very high-souled, like monastics and brahmacharis and things, and householder devotees who are devout, meditating on this great soul. And he used to say, I'll be here for this world. I want to keep this world in my mind. So we know he's working for the betterment of the world, even from such a high place as a Sapta Rishi occupies. So beautiful Pranjalihi stotram here that we like to sing from often. I think we've covered that pretty well, and that was the main thing I wanted to cover because it does bring in the yoga of action and focuses on it, but also as a comparison, side by side, with something that we want to know about in action. Akarma. There's karma and there's akarma. Somewhere in between them there's this vikarma, which is getting people into trouble. So if we could do karma consciously and we knew about not doing it all, that we could refrain. Any time, a choice, we could refrain. We could even go to work and refrain. We could go to work without working. That this is all really under the auspice of the actionless, pure self within us, Atman, which is always the witness of phenomena. And that controversy we mentioned in the first half, which is so rampant nowadays in the world, with the media and everything, that we could detach from that and see it as a kind of distant play going on only on the surface of the world. And it could never affect our true nature, which is stainless, birthless, deathless, timeless, spaceless, perfect, indivisible, imperishable. I'm just repeating my teacher. He would just say that on the podium all the time. What does the Atman consist of? Here it is in English. So, a very beautiful chart. Thank you, Koa Eula Bird, in your first appearance. Now, let's bring him back for a curtain call. And use up the rest of our time. Or shall we? I think I'm going to go in a different direction here. And show you something I mentioned I would show you, so I keep my promise. This is sevenfold road to ruination, which is painfully funny. It's an expression I can probably coin to use for it. It's painfully funny. When we look at the 4 yogas in the future, or you look back on the YouTube classes that are edited, you'll find the 4 yogas. You will have seen this chart before, and it will be something you can put together with what we just studied. That is, the 2 complementary paths. Remember, we're calling Jnana and Bhakti the 2 wings of the bird. They have to work together. And philosophically speaking, that hasn't been the mindset of Indian pundits for hundreds of years. They're pitting these against each other as if Bhakti is one path and Jnana is the other, and never the twain shall meet. And the problem between the Vaishnavas and the Shaivites is characterized by that. It's unnecessary. They're the 2 wings of the bird. So the higher knowers of Brahman will know that and everything. See, I shouldn't have put this chart up, you see, because they're all ignoring my words and they're looking at this chart now. You're impossible. Okay, so now let's look at Sri Krishna's saying here at the top of the chart. Brooding on sense objects, man develops attachment to them. From attachment comes desire. From desire, anger sprouts forth. From anger proceeds delusion. From delusion, confused memory. From confused memory, the ruin of reason. And due to the ruin of reason, he perishes. That is, again and again, he's born in the ocean of samsara, never knowing his true nature, which is imperishable. We can't be too contradictory here, because I just said the Atman's imperishable. So you can never really lose your true self. You can just forget it or cover it over with mounds of earth. That gold inside of you then doesn't shine anymore in any given lifetime. So, but things can get worse than just that. Little loss of memory, you're born in America with a nice pleasurable life and living the American dream. How bad can it be, right? It can get worse, and probably does, and might, you can make a point for it that all the karma from the different violence you've committed with your military operations and so forth is to be paid at some point, individually and collectively. So that's something that karma would be the god of the universe, and you'd have to be looking at that. Because I presented karma and Raja Yoga to you as looking into the karma that's buried in objects and senses and their connection. But I haven't really pointed out to the fact that there's a much more horrific karma that's going on, that's on the shelf and is headed back your way. That is, you as a collective country and collective consciousness, even your ancestors and so forth, beings who are passed away are returning to pay off this karma. This is a part back to our very first chart 2 weeks ago when we were looking at prabdha and sanchita karma. What kind of karma we're bringing back, taking out of the scabbard and putting in our bow and loosing. Those kinds of karmas we're in the midst of some of that prarabdha karma right now, and if you look at it on the level of a country, then and you're talking about things like controversy and politics and the powers that be and the operations they're engaged in against other countries, or sometimes with other countries, but with a sort of deception masking everything. You're talking about many layers of karma that much of which probably hasn't even been worked out yet. That's this ocean of samsara feeds on that. And if you ever caught a glimpse of the ocean of suffering, it'd turn your expression black. Glimpses of it are bad enough, but great seers have talked about that. And if you look at, say, Sri Ram and Lord Buddha, you probably see those are souls who caught a glimpse of the ocean of suffering. Ram, when he was out on pilgrimage as a teenager, came back a totally changed young man. So happy and so the apple of everyone's eye. All of a sudden he's coming back. I saw suffering, you know. Well, he didn't just see it out and about in the country, because the country wasn't that ravaged by poverty back in his time. But he saw suffering. And when Buddha went out of the palace that first time and saw the four signs, is it? Then a suffering man, a dying man, a burning corpse, a monk. He saw these different signs, and he came back a totally changed person and immediately gave up the world, left the riches of the palace, and moved off into the forest to practice asceticism. So these beings got a good snootful, as we used to say back in the time of when our dogs were running around. There's a big snootful of the ocean of suffering, and turned them very sour inside and very sobered. And they had to deal with it. Lord Vashishta, the Vasishta's yoga is all about how Vashishta took the young Ram in after that point and schooled him how to deal with this world bewitching Maya that he had seen and the suffering that's coming from it. Okay, I'm kind of getting you ready for the sevenfold road to ruination here. I didn't really intend to end the 3-series class on a sour note, but there is some humor in it. Let's say here that you started off like Sri Krishna says, brooding on sense objects. You see, brooding on sense objects. So you'd be on Broadway Boulevard. So you got on Broadway Boulevard somehow, and the first turnoff you saw was Attachment Avenue. So you took a left. Your soul took a left, you see. And then it found itself down Worry Way. And backed up out of that, tried to get some, took the overpass, then took the next right on Fear Expressway, or Error Expressway there, and took Lust Lane, and found out that wasn't any better, you see. Then it got back on Error Expressway and got on Oversight Overpass. And found its way back to Fear Expressway, and the next left was Stress Street. And it went back and then went across and went to Desire Drive. Couldn't find any peace there in any of those byways or passageways. So it got back on Error Expressway, and it saw the exit sign for Passion Place. Got involved in that for a while. And then went back across the freeway, which is now called Fear Freeway, and got into Anger Alley. And that was a real dead end, I could tell you. So getting back on Fear Expressway, it saw the exit sign for Travesty Terrace and went and made a mess out of things. And then got across Fear Expressway into Delusion Detour with its Chaos Circle, which is a constant thing, you see. Went around and round and round, sort of like a lost man in a rent-a-car in a European city, driving on the wrong side of the road. Right and round it went in Chaos Circle. Finally found itself to Confusion Court, which didn't help much. And then the only other road left to it from there was Ruination Road. It's kind of the way in which I drew this design and then found a city. I think this might be Singapore or something behind there, but whatever the case may be, Singapore, which is actually a very nice city, that is, all appearances wise, but you can see how this is all indicative of these the sevenfold road to ruin, which is one of Sri Krishna's teachings early in the Gita. We should probably look at it. I hope we have time to. I think we do. Let's go back up to Broadway Boulevard with its attachment to Worry Way and Lust Lane and see what Lord Patanjali might say about that. Mental imbalance threatens yogic equipoise and meditation. Through practice of japa and spiritual exercises, the mind ceases to react and becomes impervious to brooding and depression, along with the unsteady emotional states they cause. So that's out of the Yoga Sutras. Very good, because we just looked at the 8-limb version of Patanjali's yoga called Raja Yoga. You'll find that there in the Yoga Sutras. Now let's go across to Lord Buddha's statement among these same things: brooding, worry, attachment. Lord Buddha says, that one who is overcome by attachment, which creates entanglements in this world, his sorrows duly increase like bamboo grass in the rainy season. Oh, this is from the Dhammapada, early Hinayana or Theravadan Buddhism in early India. So these are good examples and warnings for people who are thinking of driving along this road to ruination. If we go further down on the right-hand side, we have a quote from Sri Ramakrishna. One cannot completely get rid of passions like lust and anger, so one must direct them towards God. For instance, if desire comes, transform it into yearning for realization of God. In the case of lust, that impulse must be turned into the desire for intercourse with the Atman. With anger, feel angry at all that stands in the way towards realizing God. So this is a very tantric way of teaching by Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who wouldn't be daunted at all by 3 of those 6 passions. So if you're looking across the way, there you see Passion Place. So if you were lost in Passion Place, then you probably should take Sri Ramakrishna's teachings to transform the whole thing. Because it's very unlikely, if not impossible, that one can completely get rid of passions like lust and anger. He also said about the ego, no way it's going to go away, you should just ripen it. So you might be taking the wrong tact if you're trying to root these things or pull them out by the roots. You should probably be transforming them into power. That is, take a snake, take the poison out, and you can impress your friends with it. Probably want to take the fangs out too if it has any. So you want to make sure that you keep the deep power that's there in the passions, but take the poison out. And of course that would be, if there's a lot of power in it, then I can use this power to overcome lower vibrations, vrittis, if you want to put it in yogic terms, of the mind, by higher vrittis or vibrations. That's aklista and klista, right? The klista are negative vibrations, aklista are positive vibrations, so you get rid of one using the other. This is more of a tantric way of proceeding. If you want the more Vedantic or Buddhist way of proceeding, there's some of these souls are strong enough to be able to root these things out where they stand and still survive. Their lives still survive, their spiritual life can still survive. But remember, Sri Ramakrishna told, and it probably was a teaching more from the householders, that if you pull a palm frond off the palm tree before it's turned brown, then there'll be a big hole in the tree and sap will run. It'll harm the growth of the tree. But if you wait and watch over time, you'll see that the tree turns a little yellow. Don't pull it off yet. Then you come out the next day, it's turned brown. Actually, if you leave it alone, you'll find it at the foot of the tree, he said later. So this is a person practicing that gradual detachment and transformation of these passions into using the power in the passion, but taking the poison out. So that's a very key teaching to, like I say, mostly tantric in flavor, that is different than a teaching of neti neti or trying to jump to the highest rung of renunciation before you're mature enough to do so. So right there at Delusion Detour, let's take a detour ourselves into Lord Vashishta's teachings. He says, absence of discriminative wisdom, want of mastery over the senses, and the inability to stem desires and egotism in the mind, these three culminate over time in delusion, which in turn results in mental diseases that settle into the mind like snow on the ground in winter. Mental delusion results in the performance of negative acts, which form karma and give rise to physical diseases. So this is almost a 4 or 5-fold road to ruination in Lord Vashishta's way of explaining. So you can see how the seers not only turn their minds towards explaining the highest and often abstruse truths to us, they also turn their mind to the problems of human nature so that we can attenuate them. And wisely so. If you're in a human body, you can't get rid of the ego, and you can't completely get rid of lust and anger. I would say that probably monks have as much problem with lust and anger as householders do, and they've probably just gotten to the thoughts of them, whereas the householders are still dealing more with the externals of them. But there's still a problem, difficult to overcome. So knowing that the seers are like this, they would extend themselves into the levels of our delusion here, and our spiritual desires, or our material desires and so forth, helps us, as they said back in the 80s and 70s, cut through spiritual materialism and see the truth of the matter. Do some purificatory exercises, like you saw in the 8 limbs of yoga, and cut to the chase and live in peace and bliss, which is what you were meant to do, and what you wanted yourself to do here before you were even born. You set this up for yourself. Well, the last 2 quotes here on this 7-fold road to ruination fun we're having is the one's from Sri Krishna and one's from Shankara. Let's take the one from Shankara first, on the left-hand side over near Confusion Court. Yeah, you want to go down Fear Freeway, watch Travesty Terrace go by, don't take that turn, and don't get in Chaos Circle because you'll get lost there. Find your way to Confusion Court, you'll find me there. And you'll find my teacher there too. His name's Shankara, and here's what he's going to tell you. Loss of one's memory is caused by the mind's constant acts of misidentifying the self with the non-self. So focus on the self then, and give up the distractions of worldly talk, crude music, desire-based thoughts, and the like, and affirm your oneness with the Atman. So, negation, affirmation, confirmation. My teacher used to say, affirmation is not going to be enough to say, I am the Atman, I am the Atman, I am the Atman, like the parrot saying the mantra over and over again, but it doesn't really advance spiritually by doing that. So these are 1, 2, 3 steps that you're going to have to take to make sure that there's a follow-through. Like I said, people come and hear the truth, Shravana, but they don't go away and manana very much. You see, meditate on it. Then they don't come back and ask questions, atma-vichara, about the nature of the self, and therefore they can't ever find any realization, nididhyasana, in meditation. So these 3 proofs of truth, they sometimes called, are these 3 great tools of spiritual life. Hearing, meditating upon, and realizing are part and parcel of the path called Vedanta. So Shankara here is outlining very much the path of Vedanta. Give up distractions, worldly talk, discriminate between the real and unreal, separate the wheat from the chaff and affirm your oneness with the truth. And probably get over the idea that you're evolving or becoming anything, and just be what you are, and always and ever were. The Atman, the Paramatman. Not just the Jivatman, but the Paramatman. And with time running out on us, we can look at Sri Krishna's final quote here. He says, right there near Ruination Road, since he kind of ends it up with that, during the ruin of reason, he perishes. Again, that's not loss to his Atman, is loss of memory of his Atman. So spiritual suicide, if you could use the term, would be falling into this ocean of forgetfulness, of samsara, over and over and over again, for as many lifetimes as you want. And the mind can produce as many bodies as it wants, over as long a time period as it wants, called yugas. And that's the advantage of looking inwards in time rather than back in time. Because if you look inwards in time, time begins to turn into your heavens. And if you look backwards in time, you're still on earth. Maybe not even as a human being, they say, as an animal or a eukaryote or something. And don't forget Judas, what happened to Judas Iscariot, you see, either. So Sri Krishna says here, souls of small intellects and fierce deeds, bewildered by that's a good one, bewildered by fanciful desires, and enmeshed in the snare of delusion, fall into a foul hell. These unfortunates get hurled into the wombs of the demonic and deluded and reborn again and again, then fall into a condition which is lower still. So what's lower than a foul hell? You don't want to know, they say. So that's down there at Ruination Road. So a sevenfold road to ruination teaching here, right out of the Bhagavad Gita, and drawn out and put in such a way that it's very understandable, and it's very real, as using that word tongue-in-cheek, of course, as a Vedantist. So when we hear words from Sri Krishna, sometimes it makes us think about what can offset this problem of falling into such a foul hell, or even coming close to it. Like I say, maybe a glimpse of it wouldn't be bad, because it has happened to great souls. They've seen a glimpse of the ocean of suffering. Some beings maybe have fallen into it on purpose. They've made their way into it. Remember the story of Yudhishthira, the great dharmic older brother of Arjuna, the Pandava clan, and how he was the most honest and dharmic person in the world at the time, and he told one white lie once. So that white lie had to send him through hell. So when it came time for him to pass from the body, the Lord said to him, he had a vision of his ideal, and his ideal said to him, well, there's that one little white lie which actually shows up pretty bad on your perfect record. If you had a spotted record, we wouldn't even notice it. No. But since you have a perfect record, this really looks bad, you see. So you're going to have to not go to hell like others, but you have to go through hell. So on the way to heaven, which is the highest heaven, like a heaven like the Taoists would talk about. They talk about their heavens, all full of wisdom. So on his way through there, then he had to go through and see all the people suffering at different levels of hell. And so there was a soul that had, he didn't have to be a part of it, but he had to witness it. So there are examples in the Itihasa, that means history of India, scriptural history, and these scriptures that are more devotional in nature and less non-dual, of examples of souls who have actually had that experience. And we can think of others too, having to have those experiences before they woke up to the perfection of everything and beyond this dream of suffering. So if you were speaking about Sri Krishna, you'd probably put it in these terms. Chintaya mama manasahari chidgana niranjana. Chintaya mama manasahari chidgana niranjana. Kivanupama bhati mohana murati bhakta hridaya ranjana. Kivanupama bhati mohana murati bhakta hridaya ranjana. Chintaya mama manasahari chidgana niranjana. Meditate, O mind, on Lord Hari, the pure, the ever-perfect, eternal consciousness absolute. What incomparable radiance is his. How fascinating is his wondrous form. How dear is he to all the devotees. Even more beauteous in fresh blossoming love that shames the splendor of 1,000,000 suns. Like lightning gleams the glory of his form, filling the soul with deep joy and sweet ecstasy. Worship his holy feet in the lotus of your heart, and with mind serene, eyes made radiant with heavenly love, behold that matchless sight. Overpowered with devotion, immerse yourself forevermore, O mind, in that one who is pure knowledge and pure bliss absolute. Chintaya mama manasahari chidgana niranjana. Om Tachnayo Ravrin Nimahe Gatum Yagyaya Gatum Yenu Pataye Daivi Swastarastu Naha Swastir Manusebyaha Urdvam Jagatu Besajam Sang Noastu Dripade Sang Chatushpate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Come, let us make sincere and humble offering of the small self into the great self. May we always delight in this offering. May we all revere the Lord and Mother of all sacrifices. May divine blessings be upon us. May peace be unto the entire human race. May healing, austerity, and prosperity and good divine works also abide among us. Oh, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.